Hi, hello, shalom uvracha. My name is Rabbi Nathaniel Helfgot. I am one of the faculty members at the Drisha Institute, and it is a pleasure to learn a little bit about Parashat Chukat, the portion of the week, together with you. This video is being filmed in May, so it's during Sfirat HaOmer, so I apologize that I'm a little bit, we're mourning for the loss of the students of Rabbi Akiva, but let's learn together a little bit about Parashat Chukat. In general, when one approaches a book, one of the interesting questions that I always struggle with is, what is the organization of the different chapters and the different parshiot together? And is there some connection between the narrative portions and the halachic portions that one finds in the Bible? And one of the interesting questions that appears, to me at least, is chapter 19, the first chapter of our Parashat Chukat. The Bible presents in chapter 19 the very intricate and enigmatic laws of the Parah Adumah, of the red heifer, which are the laws that help move a human being from the status of tum'ah, from the status of ritual impurity, of coming into contact with a corpse, back into the regular camp and being able to partake in the regular activities and enter into the sanctum, into the holy temple, and into the Mishkan in the time of the Mishkan and the time of the temple. And the Bible presents this elaborate ritual here at the beginning of chapter 19. And the question that I think immediately rises is, why of all places in the Bible does the Bible choose to situate these very intricate laws here in the middle of Sefer Bamidbar in the book of Numbers? Because from a narrative point of view, it doesn't really fit. The previous chapters, the previous parsha was about Korach, was the story of the rebellion of Korach, which happened right after, according to most interpretations, the story of the spies, the Meraglim, in the book of Shlach, in the chapters, of the Parsha of Shlach. And from a narrative point of view, we simply could have continued with more narrative. You have Shlach, the Meraglim, followed by Chukat, followed by Korach, the story of the rebellion against Moses, the terrible end to that rebellion, and many of the laws that emerged from that rebellion about the status of the Kohanim, the status of the priests, the Truma and Maser. These all appear in chapter 18 of the book of Bamidbar. Chapter 20 already deals with the second generation, the death of Miriam, Moses' sin, the people fighting battles on the other side of the Jordan. It would have been a perfect literary connection. And yet, the Torah puts this here. And it's not like the Torah is not aware of the phenomenon of the corpse contamination. In chapter 5 of the book of Bamidbar, the Bible already had told us, you should send out from the camp anyone who has a discharge or the eruption, the scale disease, or someone who had come into contact with the corpse. So the Torah is aware of that. That would have been a proper place to put the laws of Tumah v'Tohara, of the corpse Tumah. The Bible also could have put it in the book of Vayikra, right after Mitzorah, right after the parasha that deals with scale disease. Why, of all places, does it put it here? Many, many years ago, I heard a beautiful interpretation from our great teacher, Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, Zichrono Livracha. May his memory be blessed. Rabbi Soloveitchik suggested something very powerful. If one looks carefully, as I mentioned a second ago, the book hinges right here in chapter 19. Up until chapter 18 is the narrative of the first generation, the narrative of the generation that eventually does not enter into the land of Israel. From chapter 20 on, all commentaries, both classical and modern, Jewish and non-Jewish, agree that we are already dealing with the second generation on the cusp of entry into the land of Israel. What happened during those 38 years is very much lost to history. The Bible, in fact, tells us that God warned the Jews after the Meraglim, after the episode of the spies, that they would simply wither away in the desert. Until this entire generation, the first generation, would die, nothing would happen. And basically for 37 years, the Jewish people are waiting. They're wandering in the desert, living their life day in and day out, and waiting to die. Waiting till that first generation expires so that Jewish history can continue. And suggested Rabbi Soloveitchik, this is the perfect place to put the laws of Tumah v'Tohara, the laws of ritual purity and impurity in relationship to contact with death. Because for the last 38 years, that's what the Jewish people were confronting. The challenge of living and dying and being able to move beyond death. The symbolism of having the laws of ritual purity in contact with a corpse here is the symbolism of the movement from involvement with death, as the Bible says, Atom kol hador hahu, until that entire generation dies, versus the ability to now move on beyond death. That death doesn't have the final say, and the ability on a personal level and on a national level that Jewish history continues. It is the perfect division between the first generation and its narrative and the beginning of the second generation and the narrative that it will experience as it itself confronts its new challenges. Eventually, Moses will die, the old leadership will die, and a new leadership will come and take them into the land of Israel. But specifically, chapter 19 are the laws of Tumah v'Tahara, of confronting death, moving beyond death, and beginning life again in a state of purity and in a state of readiness. Shabbat Shalom.